Hey everyone, it's Adaptive Goddess, and today I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks on navigating Thanksgiving. So, this year during COVID, it may be a little bit different. You may not be seeing certain family members, you may just be having a small nuclear family kind of Thanksgiving, you may not be traveling, but these tips and tricks that I will be providing are applicable to any Thanksgiving you will ever experience, whether it's during COVID or not. So, Thanksgiving can be a very hectic time of year anyway. It signals that Christmas is coming if you celebrate Christmas. It signals that the it's getting colder, it's getting darker. Things that sensory wise can actually be very overwhelming, especially as someone like me who has autism. The biggest challenge that I have heard families talk about, and I have some experience in, is actually the food sensitivity and food triggers. So I myself had never experienced any kind of food sensitivity in terms of Thanksgiving. We have a very untraditional Thanksgiving meal. We typically do fondue that encompasses things like beef and seafood and sausages. So it was always something that's a little bit different. But I do know in my family some food sensitivity in terms of like textures and sensations does occur. And so I do have a little bit of knowledge, just not for me personally. But I did want to talk about it because it's one of those things that does come up during Thanksgiving. And during Thanksgiving, it's pretty much the focus is on the food. We give thanks, we're all thankful, but it's all about what's going to come for Thanksgiving dinner. Are we going to have that turkey? Are the mashed potatoes going to be to everyone's satisfaction? So, here's some tips and tricks with dealing with like food sensitivities. So, to start with, if it's your own child that has the food sensitivities, totally feel free to, if you can, make like a smaller portion of what they like to eat if you know off the top of your head that that's what they like to eat. So if your kid is like, I will be eating, like they like their certain, like their mashed potatoes more lumpy, then make them a small batch with lumpy mashed potatoes because this is a time for them that is really stressful. There's a family coming, it's big. Or even this year with COVID, there's a big change going on where that may not even be happening. And so give them a little bit of reassurance that this part is going to stay the same, that they are going to have lumpy mashed potatoes, or that you are going to accommodate them and give them some lumpy mashed potatoes. If this is not your kid, you can always ask and be like, hey, I know little Bobby has autism. Is there any like food sensitivity I should be aware of? It does help the family feel like they're being heard or that their kid is getting taken into account because part of changing the world is not only does the kid with autism need to learn how to thrive in society, but society needs to learn how to help the child thrive. And so if you can, like ask what the kids' food like sensory sensitivities are. Maybe they have lumpy mashed potatoes and try and accommodate those. But if you can't, just make your traditional Thanksgiving meal and maybe ask the family if they can bring something along to help the kid because we do want the kid, especially the kid with autism, to have at least a non-triggering experience because then they will never want to experience Thanksgiving. So next step is sitting at the table. And for my family, because we had fondue, there was always something to do because we would be putting our meat into the um, boiling wine, or it was either the oil or whatever we were putting our meat into. But for some people, having the nice, proper, fancy sit down, photogenic meal is what they really want. And for a kid with autism, that can be really stressful and actually very triggering. And they can get really antsy because of it. And so, some things you can do to help prevent that antsiness, even with just kids in general, is have like the kids' placemats be paper so that they can color, or even have the tablecloth be butcher paper that they can color on. That way, they're doing something else other than just eating, because kids don't have a very long attention span. Neither do some adults, that I have come to realize, and even having like a coloring tablecloth can even make cleanup easier, because then that can just go into the rubbish bin. So, other things about Thanksgiving is that it is a very long day, especially if you have autism and being around people and even having some social anxiety. Being around a lot of people is so tiring, especially when there is a ton of unstructured time, because then that is when anxieties are at the highest, because then there's nothing expected, there's nothing that is rule bending, there's not a lot of following of anything. And so there's just a lot of time that is just very still and very unable to really connect with people. That also means this year, where maybe there isn't a lot of people for them to play with, there's not a lot of their favorite cousins or favorite whatevers that are there to say hi to them and make them feel better. So some things you can do is actually have some pre-structured activities to have. So whether it's like a treasure hunt, a scavenger hunt, a very active game of like football or soccer or whatever other sport they love to play. You can even have things like movie marathons that have a longer duration, or it can be like you are going to binge a show with everybody. That way there's something for them to do. And if it like would even be cool if you had games that the kid really liked, or you're binging something that the kid really loves. Like for me, I am a huge Harry Potter fan. And this year we're actually going to be doing a Harry Potter movie marathon to for Thanksgiving. That way it's a longer day. Also, just know meltdowns and tantrums and even panic attacks can happen anywhere. And sometimes they may not have a real obvious trigger. And sometimes a panic attack and a meltdown or even a tantrum can actually be unavoidable, where you've made the lumpy mashed potatoes, but they're not lumpy enough. The kid has a meltdown or a tantrum over that. That's just sometimes gonna happen. And so having a lot of quiet spaces for them to decompress in, not necessarily a completely separate room, but other spaces that they can go to kind of decompress, to have some distress tolerance, to have a little bit different of a different sensory experience, all of that to be a little bit more like away from everybody so that they can calm themselves down. And if a kid is tantruming in your house, don't have any added pressure on the parents to keep their kid calm, to have their kid act normal, to have any of that, because the kid is unique. They all have a different experience in the world, and that experience can lead to everlasting change in our world that you may not even realize. And so, to either make the kid or the person or the parents feel really bad about themselves is a really mean and awful thing to do. And if it is your own kid and someone says something super mean and awful about it, just know that they don't need to be in your lives. You don't need to be surrounded by people who not necessarily don't get it, but they don't either want to get it or they don't understand or anything like that, because you're raising a beautiful kid who's going to someday change the world. So leave a comment down below. What is your favorite thing about Thanksgiving? For me, it was definitely making the fondue sauces. I mean, I have a recipe book that I made so many really wonderful, yummy sauces for our shrimp and our calamari and our beef and our pork and our sausages. I mean, we would have a feast. And it was always really fun to make the sauces so that it felt like I was involved. And like my brother would get involved in it, and we would kind of have competitions of like who can make the spiciest sauce or who can make the sweetest sauce. So that was always my favorite part of Thanksgiving. So that's it for the video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and gently tap that like button. And remember to be kind, compassionate, and true to you. And have a happy Thanksgiving.